Well, hello there, everyone, and welcome to the Strategic Planning Competency Review video from the Principles of Management course. This is actually the first competency that is covered in the course of study, and most people do start it first, and so therefore you might be listening or viewing this video as your first video to the course. Hopefully you've went over some of the guides, the getting started guides, look through some of the other materials that are available. Please note that this video will provide kind of a basic overview and target the key learning objectives for the competency strategic planning, but it's a supplement. It's not a replacement for actually reading the course material, specifically the textbook by Bateman and Snell, the Management Leading and Collaborating in a Competitive World text. So just to note, that is where most of this, if not all of this information is taken from. I've used some of the PowerPoint slides that are available on the website, the supplemental website for the management textbook, and so that's where you're seeing a lot of this material. I've also taken the liberty of changing some of the slides and adding my own. So hopefully you enjoy, and let's get started here because we have a lot to cover. So obviously strategic planning, the graduate can explain the strategic planning process. Now there is a lot to this competency. The first thing we're going to cover is the external environment. May not be specifically given like this in the course of study, but it is important to understand, and it's a great overview and intro to the next part that we're going to cover. So external environment is actually back in chapter 2, page 48, which you're not going to have addressed in the course of study. There is some supplemental material. There's a link to material on, I believe, the Porter's 5 forces, which we'll cover in the next slide. But let's start here first. Okay, this is figure 2.1 and has this kind of oval, these two embedded oval shapes with all these lines and circles and so forth. And what this depicts is the external environment to a company, to an organization. And we can define it as the forces outside an organization's control, pretty much, including its competitive environment and the macro environment, okay, which are all, again, depicted here graphically. So we have the kind of, let's focus in on that macro environment, which is the what is it, blue or marine, aquamarine type color there, teal. I'm not too good with colors, but let's go with that. We have these 5 circles. The first one is law and politics. The second was economy or economics. Then there's technology, demographics, and social values. And what this shows is basically these are all these forces, these outside forces that influence, obviously, the competitive environment, that kind of more orange reddish type oval there with the other circles and stars and so forth, right? So basically you have the laws and politics of a country. The United States has 50 different states, and various federal and state laws and local laws that a company and organization has to take into consideration. So that's what that's talking about. There's laws and politics, and if you go into international business, it gets even more complicated. Then there's the economy. That also comes into play to the competitive environment and influences and basically affects how a company or corporation operates in its environment. So economy, if the economy is good, great. If the economy is bad, probably not so good, right? In general, how much are people spending? People have jobs, unemployment, employment, so on and so forth. These are all macroeconomic related. Then there's technology. Everybody's using technology these days at the workplace. I don't think there's anybody who is not working on a computer or a similar type of device. Everybody has a computer in their pocket these days with their smartphones. And so technology obviously influences the environment that a company is competing in. There's demographics, and of course technology changes very rapidly. That's a key point. There's demographics. What is demographics? I think most people are familiar with this term. That's just the population, the people that are living in the country, in the market that you're competing in? Or is it what's the male female ratio, the age group, the income level, growth rates, so on and so forth. These are all demographics, right? There's social values. That's the last little circle down there. Social values. What is the temperature? What's the climate of the society? What are the issues, the hot buttons that are being talked about in the news? And there are many. We can talk about that for a long time, but we won't. But you can kind of figure out how social values affect the environment of an organization or a corporation. And these things all come into play when we look at the narrow competitive environment, which we're going to in the next slide, okay? And that is really where we head into Porter's 5 forces, the competitive environment. Again, this is in the COS. It's not specifically going to tell you to go to page 55, which is, again, chapter 2. It gives you outside material. But I think the text kind of gives it in a more succinct, easy to understand way. And you have this nice little graph here with 5 different kind of boxes or rectangles. We have in the center, we have what's called rival firms. These are the current firms in an industry. So you are an organization, let's say a corporation, making widgets, and you have other competitors, large or small, wherever they may be. They are your immediate competitors. They're rival firms because they also make widgets or similar types of widgets, right? And so those have to be taken into consideration. Your immediate competition. What are they up to? What do you think they will be up to in the future? Then there's other forces that Porter, who is a Harvard Business School professor, very well known, wrote many books on strategy going back many decades. And so this is one of his famous areas. And so we look after rival firms. We look at the new entrants, the blue rectangle there on top. The new entrants are the new competitors to a market. Okay, the kind of new folks that want to come in. Many examples. Let's go back to Apple when they came up with the iPhone way back, let's say over a decade ago or so ago. They were not a cell phone or a device player. They made computers and maybe software and so on and so forth. And they had many different types of technologies, but smartphones were something new. They kind of made a new category. So they were new entrants and really changed the world and definitely changed, I guess, the environment, the competitive environment of the cell phone or device makers, right? For sure. Now they're one of the largest players. So that's what that means, a new entrant coming into the market. There are barriers to entry. They could be high, they could be low. That just means that if it's very expensive to make a product or provide a service in that industry, then the barrier to entry will be high, right? If you need a lot of material, a lot of expensive equipment, a lot of employees, factories, what have you, those probably enter, or it could be many other barriers too, government barriers, whatever it may be, they will be high, and so you're probably not going to have many new people coming into the market, okay? So that's a barrier to entry. So barrier to entry for an internet website, providing news maybe is low because pretty much anybody can publish something these days, and if you target you have a niche market, you might not go up against the Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg or New York Times, but you can provide a kind of a niche market service or news service, and the barrier to entry is quite low, okay, relatively speaking. Their customers, they also are part of the competitive environment. And why so? Because they decide where to spend their money. So think about that for a second. So I am a customer and I want to buy a cell phone or a smartphone device, and so I have, I guess, a number of choices, but I can decide where to spend my money. That's really, basic idea behind that. I can demand, I want more services for my money, for my dollar. So I'll go to the company that provides that, or that I see value coming out of that transaction, right? So you have the customers. You have substitutes and complements. These are this is the idea that customers can use alternative or complementary products, right? No coffee, maybe I'll drink tea. No tea, maybe I'll drink coffee. Something like that. These are substitute products. Many examples, right? No beef is expensive, maybe I'll have some chicken or pork or something. These are substitutes. There's complements, and these are complementary products. So very basic idea. You buy hardware, you need software. Those are complementary, and vice versa. Those are complementary products. You buy a printer, usually they give them away. They're very cheap, but how much is that ink that you'll need to run that, right? To print that report out. That's the whole idea behind that. There's suppliers to an industry, to a firm. They can affect in many ways, the competition, the competitiveness of your company, of your corporation, because there are switching costs. You have a supplier or certain suppliers, and if you think you want to switch to another supplier because maybe they provide you with a lower price, apparently there's probably some costs involved in that, especially if you have a long-term relationship and you have your operation, your supply chain set up already. It's going to be difficult to switch. Okay? There's many other factors behind that. So, but anyway, suppliers, if there are many suppliers, well, maybe you can play one or two against the others, right? There's more to choose from, price and competitiveness and type of product and features. If there's few suppliers in an industry, in a market, well, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. You're going to have to depend more on maybe one or two or three suppliers, and so it's going to be more difficult to switch or to even find another supplier. So that's what that competitive environment is. So we talked about the macro environmental forces, kind of ones you can't control. And then the competitive environment also you really can't control, but we're getting more closer to the actual company, all right, the actual corporation and the environment they operate in. Generic value chain. This is from page 320. Actually jumping to, I think it's chapter 9 in the book. And value. What does that mean, value? Customers want value for their money, right? The basic idea of a company, for-profit, and even, I guess, non-profit, because they also provide a product or service in many ways. But it's the value chain behind what a company sells as far as a product or service that they provide. So the textbook defines value chain as a sequence of activities that flow from raw materials to the delivery of a good or service, with additional value created at each step, right? So if you're not creating value, turning sand into a silicon wafer, then nobody's going to buy your product if it doesn't work or it doesn't provide value to somebody. You don't have a business. You don't have a business. So this is also from Michael Porter, the Harvard professor, and again a very fundamental idea in management, in business overall. So again, value chain, the sequence of activities that flow from raw materials to the delivery of a good or service, with additional value created at each step. So you look at this diagram. This is from figure 9.3 in the text. We have on top, we have support activities, and then we have going, I guess, horizontally, we have research and development, or R&D, and inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, marketing, sales, and service. So that's the basic, the fundamental aspect of the value chain. These are primary activities that a company or a corporation uses to turn, to make some products or develop a service. So they research and develop whatever they're making or providing, and then they go through that process of inbound logistics, meaning, let's say, getting the raw material or setting up their service, and then actually manufacturing something, and then shipping it out, selling it, and providing service after the fact. Okay, so in each step of that chain, the value chain, right, the supply chain, whatever we want to call it, there should be value created. If not, then you're not going to make a margin. You're not going to make a profit margin on what you're doing, because customers are not going to want to pay that money for your product or service. Does that make sense? So value chain highlights both primary and support activities, as a product or service makes its way from development, research and development, all the way to sales and eventually aftermarket service, okay, with each step adding value that generates or translates into a margin or a profit for the organization. The support activities are on top, and they labeled them here as firm infrastructure. So whatever it takes to kind of run the firm. There's accounting, there's human resources, there's IT technology. Even though it's fundamental, it's still a support activity unless you're making computers and software, but still it supports whatever else you're doing in the organization. There's procurement, and there's finance. There's all these other support activities. We can perhaps call them cost centers, because they're not necessarily making money for the organization, but they are supporting, in a fundamental way, it's supporting the organization moving forward. So they're all kind of works together, obviously, and we see this value chain, okay, in a kind of a continuum, and with the goal, again, is a margin or profit margin at the other end. So take a look at that again, page 320, if you want to review that in more detail. Now we're going to go on to the decision-making stages versus formal planning steps. So take a look at that figure 4.1. We have those 6 blue boxes, or rectangles. Going down the left side is the general decision-making stages. It's not really part of the text, part of the course. I think it's in chapter 3 specifically. And that's compared to what we're talking about now, the planning steps, and that's chapter 4, where this, again, figure is taken from. So it's just kind of showing that both these decision-making steps, if we kind of break that down, the decision-making process and formal planning process or steps kind of correspond with each other. You see that? These arrows going to each of the boxes. So we have, for decision-making, we have identifying and diagnosing a problem, okay, the basic step. And in the planning process, we have we call it situational analysis. We're going to review all these in subsequent slides. Okay, so we go from situational analysis to alternative goals and plans. Then we have goal and plan evaluation, evaluating the goal and the plan. Then you select the goal and plan, you implement it, and you monitor and control. Okay, so we're going to review these going forward. Starts pretty much at page, again, going back to chapter 4 now, page 126 onward. Okay, 126. That's a really important chapter, so make sure you read that chapter 4. So we have those steps. We have 6 steps. We're going to go first into, I guess the first step is the situational analysis. This is a process where the planners use within, of course, the time and resource constraints, right? They don't have all the time in the world, and they don't have unlimited resources. There are always some constraints, but they gather, interpret, and summarize information that they find that is relevant to the planning issue under consideration. All right, so situation. You look at the situation, you gather the information as much as you possibly can, and then you proceed from there. Okay, then you look at your goals and plans. Okay, so what kind of goals? A goal is an end or target that managers want to reach. You have goals to graduate, to get your degree. You have probably financial goals, career goals that you want to reach. Everybody probably has some type of goal. And then you have plans, just like managers. You have a way, it's a plan, whether it's written or in your head. You have a plan to reach those goals, or that goal. All right, so it says here the actions or means that managers intend to use to achieve organizational goals. That's the kind of official definition from the book. An organization also has, of course, so you formulate that goal and plan. You also have contingency plans, and you've probably heard this phrase before. It may come up in the assessment. It's a set or sets of actions to be taken when a company's initial plans have not worked well, or if events in the external environment require a sudden change. Contingent, plan B, that's what that is, a contingency plan. Plan B, plan C. So you go forward and things change, sometimes very quickly, mostly due to either some economic, some disaster, natural disaster, or a sudden switch in the competitive environment that's beyond your control. And so you have to, organization has to have some kind of contingency plan. What are they going to do? What's the plan B for moving forward? And then, of course, you evaluate the plans. You decide on them, you evaluate, which is basically prioritizing. You prioritize and you eliminate certain goals and plans based on advantages and disadvantages as you see them in your analysis, right? You evaluate which way should we go. Okay, that's kind of the basic aspect of this. And then there's these two terms that you may see. It's called satisficing and optimizing. Satisficing is basically choosing an option that is acceptable, although not necessarily the best or perfect. So you satisfied with what you can get, basically. So they have a fancy term for this called satisficing. So it's acceptable. It's not the ultimate, but it's good enough. Okay, and optimizing is the idea of you optimize, you achieve the best possible balance among several type of goals. So you kind of put them together. You optimize based on what you have. All right. So these are terms that are used in the text and used in management, and you should probably be aware of them. We continue the planning steps. We have a goal and plan selection. Obviously, once you get all this information, evaluate these goals and plans, you have to select one based on the scenario of what future conditions may look like, based on whatever possible goals and plans you have. So you select the goal and plan, all right, based on this information. Simple, right? Then you implement it. Once a selection is made, you have to put these plans into action. And if you don't do that, you really won't go anywhere, right? You have to start implementing in order to achieve the goals that you decided upon. Probably this is the most difficult part. This is where companies screw up. This is where the difficulty, where the rubber hits the road, where the difficulty comes out, and where things have to be changed sometimes, and many times, because of whatever that affects the organization, or implementation is not carried out properly. So monitoring and controlling, that last stage is key. That kind of comes into play directly with implementation. It's a normal part of ongoing operations, and you monitor how are you doing, how is the implementation process going forward, and you control, you correct things that are going wrong, and you try to get them right and get them back on the right path. All right, so those are those 6 stages, and that you should review also from the text, like I said. What is strategic planning? Just a few quick terms here. Page 131 onward. Strategic planning. Think about that for a minute. The book talks about procedures that organizations use in making decisions about long-term goals and strategies. Now we get to the strategic planning, this big term, the crux of the competency. So these are procedures, again, organizations use in making decisions about long-term goals and strategies. They ask questions. These are directly from the book. So, where will the company be active? How will we get there, right? How are we going to get to where we want to be? How are we going to win in the marketplace? How fast will we move? Are we going to try to be first movers and change the market and go in, first? Or are we going to, wait and see, be the follower, right? Both strategies work depending on the situation. Or both strategies could work depending on the situation. And in what sequences are we going to make any changes? How are we going to obtain our financial returns, our results, okay, which is important for pretty much any company, public or private. So that's the basic intro to strategic planning. There's 3 levels of planning. There's a hierarchy that they talk about in the book, also page 131. And take a look at this figure 4.2. There's 3 planning levels. There's strategic, tactical, and operational. And they each correspond with the 3 major management levels. Now, all levels are important and must be aligned with the other, or overall implementation will not be successful. So we take a look at this figure, and we see the strategic, tactical, and operational, right? If those military buffs out there, you'll see what that, see the relationship, the strategic plans, the tactical, the operational. So a company uses those words as well, and there are these different levels. So, for example, the managerial level, strategic will be more of the top, tactical more middle, and operation the front line. The frontline workers, people carrying out working with the customers on the goods and services. And there's the level of detail. Strategic level is a low level of detail, kind of the big picture, right? The big picture. Once we get to tactical, we have more of the medium. There's more detail coming through, and operational is high. It's more specific. How are we going to really carry out this plan? How are we going to get that product produced? For example, the time horizon, of course, changes. The book talks about obviously strategic is more long-term, say 3 to 7 years. That really could vary depending on the company and the market, the industry. Medium, they say, is 1 to 2 years, and short is less than a year. That's a time horizon, okay? So again, all levels, the strategic, that big picture, ultimately where are we going, where are we headed long-term, what do we want to do, our vision, our mission. Do we want to make some new products? Do we want to tackle the competition? I guess you do. In any case, do you want to be the market leader? What do you want to achieve? And then tactical are the more, okay, let's start getting down into details. How are we going to make this happen? What are the tactics we're going to use to achieve that strategic goal? And then operational, put it into practice, put it into operation. Okay, so those are those 3 levels. Figure 4.2, page 131. A few pages later, 135, the book starts talking about the strategic management process. And we have this nice little figure, 4.4, that introduces strategic management. Okay, we have strategic planning. Strategic management is this idea. It's a process that involves managers from all parts of the organization in the formulation and implementation of strategic goals and strategies. So it's not just coming up from top and going down, disseminating down to the ranks. It's like everybody is in it together. The managers from all parts of the organizations, work together. It's the idea of that high involvement company, high involvement organization that you will hear. If you haven't seen organizational structure yet, you will. That's where that term comes from. So basic strategic management. In TQM, the next competency, total quality management, you'll talk about, quality is not just something that happens at the end by some inspector who checks the product and throws it back in the machine if it doesn't come out properly. Everybody, total quality management, everybody has to be involved in that process, from the lowest level worker on up. Okay, so coming back to strategic management, we have these different stages: establishment of mission, vision, and goals. And from there, we analyze the internal strengths and weaknesses and the external opportunities and threats. Okay, so we're looking at internally at the company. How are we looking inside, and what are things looking like on the outside? Going back to that external environment we just talked about in the last few slides. That macroeconomic, the competitive environment. What does that look like? What's the information? And then we put that together in what's called a SWOT analysis, the strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats analysis. And we use that to formulate our strategy. We implement, okay, and we control. We go back and see how we're doing, okay. So those are the basics of that strategic management process. It's kind of important to know for the assessment. I'm sure you're going to get several questions on this. So we're going to start with the mission, vision, and goals. Think about a mission and or vision statement that you've maybe seen in your organization or an organization you're familiar with. Can you think of one? Every organization pretty much has a mission, I would think. It's an explanation of the basic purpose and scope of operations. This is pretty much taken from the book. I'm not going to read it, but I give you a mission statement from Bloomberg News, some website that I view pretty much daily, several times, for financial, for business-related news. I would recommend looking at Bloomberg or some other type of service to learn what's going on out there in the business world. But anyway, they have this mission statement that looks like 3 sentences long. Bloomberg News strives to be the most influential source of reporting on economies, on and on. Again, I'm not going to read it. You can read it. But it kind of states really the basic purpose of what they're about. The vision, organization's vision, is a more long-term direction and shows its strategic intent. You may see that word pop up, the strategic intent of the organization. A longer-term vision, what do they want the world to look like on their terms, right? So Amazon's is a little bit shorter. I'm going to read that. It's Amazon's vision is to be the Earth's most customer-centric company. Customer-centric, focused on the company, on the customer. To build a place where people can come to find and discover anything they might want to buy online. Interesting. Okay, you can judge how you think that flows, but that's what Amazon's vision statement is. To be the Earth's most customer-centric company, build a place where people can come find anything and buy anything online. Okay, Starbucks, another short one, and they kind of combine. It looks like they combine the mission and vision statement, and what they have is our mission is to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time. Nice little short and sweet, kind of that large scale. They want to nurture the human spirit, right? Really, this is way beyond coffee and frappuccino. That's a big thing, right? It's their big goal, their vision of how they see the company, their intent going forward. So take a look at that, mission, vision, and goals. Once you establish those, it's time to analyze. And again, we go back to external opportunities and threats. We look at the industry and market. Again, pretty much using the Porter's 5 forces, or looking at the Porter's 5 forces, as well as the macroeconomic environment, the industry and market that you're in. What does the market look like? Market share, so on and so forth. Growth trends and so forth. The competitors in the market, large or small. The political and regulatory environment. Again, remember we talked about that. That definitely influences things. Taxes and laws and so forth. Very important. There's social and demographic trends. Again, we talked about that. There's what we call, let's say, human resources, labor trends. Is the labor available there for your industry, or is it not there? Your human resources, talent for that in that specific industry. What does that look like? The macroeconomic environment, the technological, again, all things we talked about. Technology, is it changing? Well, pretty much it's changing rapidly and everywhere, I would say. So that has a big say or a big play in what your external opportunity and threats will look like. And then put down here, remember stakeholders, the concept of stakeholders. Stake, S-T-A-K-E, not steak as in beef. Stakeholders are folks or people, usually people, that have a stake in your organization, that your organization, your company. Okay, that could be anybody. That's customers, suppliers, people in the public, people down the street, stakeholders, anybody who has come into contact with your product, politicians, economists, so on. But these are all stakeholders. They have some kind of stake that may not be necessarily doing business directly with you or employed by your company, but they have some kind of a stake in how you do and what the company does. All right, so these are things that you need to analyze as part of your analysis, your overall external analysis. Then there's internal strengths and weaknesses. Okay, remember external opportunities and threats, internal strengths and weaknesses. You have to look at the company's or corporation's financial situation. What does that look like? Is it good, bad? Not, so-so. There's the market position again in relation to the overall market and your competition. What does your market position look like? What do you think it will be in the future? Your operations, what does that look like within the company? Your supply chain, your value chain. Human resources. Again, do you have the resources needed to move forward with your strategic plan and reach your goals? If not, you have to think about that. And there's whatever other analysis of internal activities, right? It could be internal technology or something specific to your industry or your company, your business. Okay, so again, external and internal. Take a look at that. Very important. So we put all this stuff together. It's in the SWOT analysis, the strengths, weakness, opportunities, threats analysis, and you compare these things to help you formulate your strategy. And here I have a little graph there. You have them top left. You have strengths, which are again strengths internal to the company. And you have weaknesses on the other side, the top right, weaknesses that you see in relation to other companies in your industry. What are the internal problems that you see arising? And then the lower left is opportunities. Okay, it doesn't have to be in any specific order. It's just to graphically represent this. Opportunities are external. What do you see? Is the market growing? Do you have something that an unmet market need, untapped potential out there? You want to take a look at that, and you want to look at your threats, your external threats from whatever it happens to be in the external environment. It could be competition, economic changes, the recession, what have you. These are all threats, possible threats. You tick all that together, all right, all the stuff that you analyze. There's a lot of analysis, and obviously the bigger the firm, the more people that are doing this, full-time, analyzing the situation constantly. You incorporate this into a SWOT analysis, and then you go forward, hopefully, and formulate your strategy. Where do you see that opportunity? Okay, that's what this is going to help you do. You analyze and try to see where your strategy is. Should we try to make the next smartphone? Should we launch a new type of coffee, compete with Starbucks, whatever it happens to be? This will help you get there. Page 140 talks about resources and core competencies. I want to touch on that briefly here. There's a term called benchmarking, which is very important to the SWOT analysis and analyzing your competition. It's process, the is directly really from the book, process of assessing how well a company's basic function and skills compare with those of another set of companies. You benchmark. You've probably heard this before, used in your own organization. You want to compare, you benchmark. How are you doing in relation to others? The goal is to thoroughly understand the best practices, right? Best practices of other firms. What are they doing that makes them successful, that make them successful in whatever they're doing? And you try to undertake actions to achieve a better performance yourself, right? And hopefully at a lower cost. And then the focus is on your core competencies. If you start, whatever your organization starts to do, that becomes its core competency. What do you do well? It's a unique combination of skills, knowledge, and resources that a company or organization possesses, which gives it an edge over competition. That's your core competency. What do you do better than your competition? That will be your core competency. What are you good at, right? That's a key thing. Hopefully you maintain that core competency. You build others as well. It doesn't have to be just one, but core competency, making technology, making computers, making cell phones, delivering some type of accounting service. That's your core competency, and you do that as good, hopefully better than anybody else out there. Remember those. There's a next step in that strategic plan management process, strategy implementation, and this will also be directly pretty much from 150 onward, page 150 onward, strategy implementation. They talk about 4 different subtasks for related steps. The first one being define your strategic tasks. what, in hopefully in simple language, what do you have to do to create or sustain your competitive advantage, your core competency. And step 2 is you assess your organization capabilities. It's kind of a little bit redundant because we already talked about, we analyzed this, but again, we're looking at implementation. Are we going to be able to implement what we decided? So you want to look at your capabilities in many different aspects, and this is when a lot of task forces come out based on the different functional areas and departments in your firm, in your organization. Analyze, can we make this happen? How can we make this happen? Then you develop an implementation agenda, kind of another plan to implement. How are we going to manage things, and relationships and reporting structures and so on and so forth, and what skills are missing, what skills do people have, and also rewards. Looking at rewards for doing a good job. What are we going to do as far as rewards are concerned? Then you create an implementation plan. So you develop the agenda, okay, kind of like a statement, how it's going to change the activities, create an implementation plan, get that task force or task forces together, and develop the implementation plan, okay, and then of course, you monitor as you go. That goes into strategic control again, and you'll talk more about or learn more about strategic control specifically in the organizational structure competency. Okay, so once you complete the other steps, you implement the strategy. You have to find a way or see how you're doing, take corrective action as you go along. Right, if things are not going according to plan. All right. So next we're going to have a summary of corporate strategies. And we have this figure 4.6 from page 145, also from chapter 4. We have a summary of corporate strategies, and there's a lot of information here. We're going to try to break it down. Corporate strategies are very important, and at the center there, that kind of purplish oval, we have a concentration strategy. What just that means is a company is focused on one segment, one product, one type of product or service. And that's what they do, okay? Whatever happens to be. You can think of examples in your own industry or things that you buy every day, okay? Concentration, you're focused on one thing. There's concentric diversification, okay? And that's basically you're focused in on related industries, related products, okay, from your main. So we do talk about Starbucks a lot in this competency, especially in the cohort. What's their competency? Well, their concentration is coffee, producing coffee, high quality type of coffee, cup of coffee. Of course, they have different configurations, and cold and hot and iced and this and that, but now they're starting to diversify, concentrate into related industries, right, like tea and bottled coffees and coffee drinks and freeze-dried coffee, things of these are all concentric diversifications, very similar to their basic focus on coffee, beverage, caffeinated beverages, I guess beverages in general, food and drink. All right, so that's kind of their focus. So if a company, if they then diversify, like General Electric is a perfect example, you diversify into different unrelated industries, then you become a conglomerate, okay? And ironically, GE is going back to where it was and focusing, still I guess you could say a conglomerate, but they're more industrial focused now as they sold their whites goods, their appliance business, they spun off their finance business. They have many different businesses. They're still a conglomerate, but they're starting to narrow down. They used to own, I think they sold NBC. It used to be in media as well. So a real example of a conglomerate, many different unrelated businesses together. under this, well, not under the same roof, but again, they owned many different unrelated businesses. And that's just to diversify, right? Diversify in case one or two go down, you're still making money off other industries that are hopefully doing well. Then we talk about the vertical. You see that even though it should be probably right vertical up and down, but they have it going to the left and the right here from that basic oval there in the center. You have, and I added the word backwards. We look on the left side, vertical integration backward into the supply chain. Remember that? That's going to come up. Backward vertical integration. You go back and you integrate with your supply chain. So meaning you start to buy or own your supply chain. The companies that provide your raw material, that provide your material components. If you manufacture something, that is backward integration. Okay, and that you can go all the way back and again own. If you brew coffee, you own the fields where the coffee is grown on. That's the ultimate backward integration, right? You own the coffee growers, the roasters, and so forth. That's going backward in your supply chain. You can also go forward vertical integration in your distribution channel. So if you start looking at your distribution channel and start to own that was forward integration. And I always use the example of Tesla, the electric car company, Elon Musk, right? Very well known. They're always in the news media because they're doing different things, trying to go against the grain. They have a kind of very differentiated product. Okay, we'll come to that next slide. The all-electric car goes very far. It's fast. It's efficient, not cheap, but they are going backward in their supply chain, and they're building, I think, in Nevada, a huge battery company working with other suppliers, Panasonic. So they want to own that supply chain, the battery component, very important part of an electric car, right, is to own the batteries and being able to develop new technologies without having to rely on other companies to do so. So they're going backward and they're going forward because they don't sell through a dealer network that basically every car company sells through. They own their own distribution channel. So they're forward integrating. They're meeting the customer directly, right? And they do that through shops. I don't want to say kiosks, I guess shops in malls and high-end shopping malls. And I've seen that here on the East Coast where I am, several examples. That's where they sell their vehicles. So they don't sell them to a dealer and then the dealer sells them to the customer. They take orders directly from the customer and they go back and build that car for them. All right, so you see that the corporate strategies, many different strategies, concentration, concentric diversification, which sometimes I would say horizontal diversification, so going into related businesses or industries. Conglomerate is if you go into all different unrelated businesses or industries. And then the backward vertical integration, you start buying up your supply chain or controlling them. Forward vertical integration, forward, going into distribution channels and starting owning them. Again, figure 4.6, page 145, excuse me. And the last slide, I believe, is a summary of business strategies taken directly from the text. We have the two main ones, low cost and differentiation. Pretty, I guess, the only ones that I can think of. Low cost, this is a business strategy where an organization focuses on offering a more or less standardized, no frills product or service. They do that in the most efficient way. They want to be efficient, mass production. The goal is to be low price, hopefully quality, but low price, be the low price leader. That's low cost. Many examples out there. Just think of where you buy your food, your groceries, the services that you obtain. For example, are you going for the lowest cost, right? If you see value in that, then you're looking for a low cost supplier or low cost company to provide that service or product. So I think they use Southwest Airlines as a good example. There's others, they're more no frills, right? You no seat assignments, you buy the ticket, it's very reasonably priced and go from A to B, and the plane just goes back and forth. It's very efficient, and people enjoy it. It's a great company. They're doing very well, but they don't have that complicated network. They don't have any frills that other airlines, let's say, have. So that's always a good example. Differentiation. This is a strategy where organization focuses on offering more customized, different products or services that other companies, competitors, are unwilling or unable to match. Okay? So differentiation, being different. You want to be different. The goal is to be unique. So you want to differentiate yourself. Apple computers want to be different. They didn't make the PC. They made an Apple. They made different design, different software. They wanted to be different. Very good example, right? And they do very well in that, in the markets that they're in. Okay, so they really took that to the next level. There's many examples out there. Again, low cost, differentiation, really the key things. You could probably, some people would say, no, you can't do both, but I guess you would be able to do that. Mass customization is a technique. Well, I think we'll read about that in subsequent chapters. But this is the basics: low cost and differentiation. The business strategy, your actual product. You're talking about selling that product or services. The other slide talked about corporate, the larger level corporate strategies, how you're going to operate in the overall, the big business, the big scale of things, right? The large, grand scale of things, The business strategy is more of the, what are you going to do as far as getting your product, your service to market? You're going to be low cost, or you're going to be differentiated. Usually that means more expensive, okay? That's the key, which I don't think I mentioned before. Differentiate, usually the idea is you want to charge a higher price, a margin, get a better margin for that because it's unique. And if somebody wants that, they'll have to pay the price. So there you have strategic planning. If you learned something, good luck, and we'll see you again in the next video.